Very good discussions. Can everybody hear me? Hey, I didn't think, I used to holding meetings in this room, so I didn't think I'd have any problem being heard. I'm usually don't being loud. Okay? My name is Don Sinner. I happen to be a 36-year educator. I graduated from this school system and I teach at the school. And I'm also a 15-year member of the Education Minnesota Governing Board and just finished a 12-year term as an NEA National Director, Board Director. So without further ado, I'm going to call in the Encore Choir, and they're going to lead us in the national anthem. They are from here in Lakeville, South. In order to keep it respectful and make sure that we have as many time for as many questions as possible from you, the constituents, we're going to try and treat each other with respect. Tough questions are welcome, but we please ask you to refrain from it. Keep it civil. Each person will have 1 minute to ask their question. Everyone will get to follow Robert's rules, and everybody will get a chance to answer one question before anybody gets a chance to ask a second question. And if you start to go on, reach close to that minute, you will hear me say, and your question is. I will try to politely urge you to ask your question so we can get to the panelists for their answers. Each of the panelists will have 2 minutes to respond to each of the questions. Our main goal here tonight is to discuss education policy. Hopefully these individuals will do a fine job of laying out their beliefs on what that should be. And then towards the end, we have a time reserved for questions on any topic. So when we start the questioning, we're going to start with education policy questions only. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Angie to introduce our panelists.
And make opening remarks.
Yeah.
Perfect. Just making sure I know what I'm doing. So I just want to say thank you. It is such an honor. I'm going to call this the Back to School edition of the Congresswoman's Town Hall. So it's such an honor to be back with you tonight. This is the 8th Town Hall that I have conducted since I was sworn in as a member of Congress. I'm incredibly pleased tonight to be focused on education. I want to start just by telling all of you why this is such an important topic to me. And I want to be personal for just a second. I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today if not for high quality public education in this country. I would not be standing here in front of you today. Many of you know that my experience growing up to a single mom was that I watched my mom go back to college. She was in junior colleges and community colleges for most of my childhood. My experience was that she was trying to make a better life for herself and for her 3 young kids. I was able to go to college, a good public state college, because I was able 30 years ago to work 2 jobs and help earn my way through college. That is not the case in this country anymore. I'm also the mother of 4 sons. I'm the wife of an educator. And of our 4 sons, 3 of them have already graduated from high school and are out of the house. I often say they're out of the house, but not quite off the payroll. But of our 4 sons, Josh has taught us that we need to rethink the way we think about high schools and secondary education in this country. We need to go back to a day where kids understand that it is not a second choice to go into a trade or to technical school, that this is an option in this country, and that we need to make sure that kids are presented their full range of options as a nation. Now, we still have 1 left in high school. In fact, I'm probably missing open parent night at Rosemont High School tonight. The parking lot is full here at Lakeville South because all of these parents are here. The last time I turned up for open parent night was when my son was 15 years old, and he announced to me that, "Mom, parents don't come to parent night for 15-year-olds. So we're still working through that, and I think he was really, really pleased that I had a town hall tonight. So one of our sons of our 4 has also taught us to appreciate and understand the need for special education funding in this country. One of our sons has special needs. I'm an IEP mom. This district sent an IEP mom to Congress. And I have worked across the aisle tirelessly, and I will keep working across the aisle tirelessly until the IDEA Full Funding Act is passed by the United States House of Representatives. I have to give a shout out to my Republican colleague Pete Stauber in this effort, because Pete has been right beside me since day 1. I've told some of you the story that Pete and I didn't meet each other during our respective elections. We met each other after we were both sworn in. They take all new members of Congress, there were 85 of us, and put us on a train together. They literally train us out of DC together, and we go through essentially a new member orientation. On that train, I saw Pete sitting down reading his newspaper. I was on my way to the galley, probably to get a beer. In fact, that's exactly what I was doing. And I sat down next to Pete, and we just started talking about our kids. And see, this is a class change. Next teacher, please.
Thank you for going through your student schedule tonight. This concludes our open house. We hope to see you at conferences in October.
Awesome. Pete and I sat down and we talked about our kids, and we talked about our country, and we talked about the kind of politics that we would like to see in this country. And we didn't agree on everything, just like each of us won't agree on everything in this room tonight. But we agreed that we would sit and talk. We'd figure out the things we could agree on, and where they were, we would work together to make this country a better place. In my first 8 months in Congress, that's what I've tried to do. I am incredibly pleased to report that 80% of the bills that I have co-sponsored since becoming your representative are bipartisan. They have Democrats and Republicans on them. I am incredibly pleased to report that my first bill has passed the House. It was the Local Water Protection Act, and that Senator Klobuchar and Marco Rubio are carrying the bill in the Senate. I'm incredibly pleased to report since my last town hall that something called the FEED Act, which I'm having a blast on the Ag Committee, by the way. I don't know if any of you see me on farms all over the district, but I'm just having a blast because it is a tenuous time for this nation's farmers. And the FEED Act was an idea that we cooked up with South Dakota Republican Dusty Johnson. He's a freshman member of Congress too, who I got to know in my first week of Congress. And because of all the flooding we've had in Minnesota and in South Dakota, we wanted to allow farmers to get down cover crops. Guess what cover crops also do? They sequester carbon. We wanted those cover crops down so that our farmers could still get their crop insurance even though they couldn't plant anything else there. The administration liked this bill so much, the Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, adopted the idea. And this year, all of our farmers will be able to claim their prevent plant for their cover crops that they put in. So I don't know, let's get to education, but I don't know if you can tell, but I'm having an absolute blast on the policy part of this job. I am just thrilled to be able to say that we're working as best we can in difficult political times across the aisle, and I'm looking forward to figuring out tonight how we can work on education issues together. So thank you. All right, let's get to our panel. As always, my district team is here tonight. District team, raise your hand if you have an issue. I may point to one of those individuals. Kaylee is sitting right in front of me, which is awesome. They are going to press the button if you go more than a minute. And if any of the panelists go more than 2 minutes, they are going to press the button on us. And I have highly encouraged Kaylee tonight to ding me if I go over my time. So there you go. These caseworkers who are in the room, they're here to help you navigate the problems of sort of dealing with the federal government. So we'll talk about that in my concluding remarks. And I want to briefly introduce these are my panelists and ask them to say a few words. Our first panelist to join me today is Mark Cray. Mark is Executive Vice President at SEIU, Local 284, and a special education paraprofessional. And Darren Court is Assistant Commissioner for Student Wellbeing at the Minnesota Department of Education. I know both of you have a ton of experience. I'll let you make a few opening remarks, but before I do that, I want to recognize Mary Krieger. Mary, please stand up, say hello. Mary is the superintendent, ISD 196, so she's my kid's superintendent. Don't tell on me tonight. And I want to recognize Robert Bierman, who is our state representative, Apple Valley. And I also just want to briefly say thank you. If you're a veteran of this nation, would you please stand up or put your hand up and be recognized? Thank you. Thank you. Our public schools are operating and our democracy is operating because of what each of you have given us. So thank you so much. Now, before I forget, because I almost did, I'm going to ask everyone to stand, and we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I always start my town halls with the pledge. Pick a flag, any flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Also, without further ado, take it away, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Fry. I'm a special ed paraprofessional in the West St. Paul School District's transition program. I'm also first vice president of SEIU Local 284. SEIU 284 represents more than 8,000 school service employees, including clerical staff, paraeducators, nutritional service workers, buildings and grounds workers, early learning staff, custodians, bus drivers, and higher educational faculty throughout the state of Minnesota. Our local is working for a future where students in every Minnesota school have all that they need to succeed from pre-K to career. Minnesota has a long reputation as a state that values investment in the common good and education for all as a path to prosperity. However, we have grown accustomed to reaping the benefits of past commitments rather than keeping that same promise for future generations. As a paraeducator, I can tell you that school districts struggle to keep up with the mandated costs of educating students with special needs. But I also know that appropriately supporting students with special needs is critical for their development and future success. Minnesota and the federal government don't pay their fair share of the cost of special education, leaving schools and school districts to make up the differences. Everyone is asked to do more with less, and that's just not sustainable. Because of tight funding, too often, paraeducators are asked to learn on the job how to support our most vulnerable students. Paras need to meet with the IEP teams to learn about the students' unique and individual needs before the beginning of the school year, and paras need the opportunity for training in de-escalation strategies, trauma-informed practices, and multicultural issues. Our members love our jobs, we love our students, and we want to do what's best for them. Thank you, Angie Craig, for the work to fully fund Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. I know that it will make a difference in the lives of our members and the students that they care for. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Darren Cordy. I'm an Assistant Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Education. As the Congresswoman mentioned, we call our office the Office of Student Wellbeing, but it really encompasses the Department's special education programs, our nutrition programs, our health and our youth development programs. So very excited to be here to talk to you today. Commissioner Ricker wishes she could be here today, but she had another obligation. So I've been working in education policy in Minnesota for about 10 years now. And I gotta say, this is, as somebody who works in education, this is one of the most exciting times that I've seen in Minnesota. We're doing really well in a number of ways as a state. We have record high graduation rates. We have top in the nation ACT scores. In national tests, we perform at or near the top in both reading and in math. So in a lot of ways, and for a lot of our students, we're doing a really good job. But we also know that there's a lot of students for whom we're not doing such a good job. Too many students that are falling behind. We know that we have unacceptable opportunity and achievement gaps for students of color, for students with disabilities, for indigenous students, for students living in poverty. So we've got a lot of work to do, but what makes me excited about it is that we have both an education commissioner and a governor who have spent their entire lives working in public education, both as teachers and as well as the First Lady too, working as administrators. So they've worked in schools, they've worked with families, they've seen the struggles that students are dealing with. And they know what it's like and what it takes to educate students who have traditionally been disadvantaged. And so you sometimes hear the governor talk about educating the whole child, and the concept that students are more than just the test score that they're getting on these standardized tests, right? In order to determine how we're going to best serve our students, we need to know, do they have safe and stable housing? Are they well nourished? Are they well fed? Are they healthy? Are they active? Do they have access to health care when they're sick? And it's only after looking at that whole picture of the child that we really understand what schools are dealing with when children are walking through their doors. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you all tonight, and I thank Congresswoman Craig for having me and for the Lakeville Public School District for hosting us.
Thank you so much.
We have one microphone, one speaker at a time, and we're going to line up so we can get through as many as possible. We'll start here with the first question, and then you can line up down the middle of the aisle, and as soon as they're done asking the question and the answer, the next person can step up and we can go very quickly. Okay? So the floor is open for questions.
Catherine. My son Preston go to school at Lakeville Public Schools. And I'm a big fan of Angie Craig. It's no lie, it's not a surprise to anyone in the room. But I have some hard questions for us as a state. How are we retaining the professionals who serve us at our public schools and honoring their professionalism as educators in our schools?
Thank you so much for the question. Jackie Craig is no relation to me, just for the clarity of the room. Thank you so much for being here, Jackie. I will let you guys talk about the state, either how we're honoring or what we should be doing is how I'll reframe your question a little bit. Look, the best thing we can do is fully fund the obligations that the federal government has made to our local school districts as a first priority. You know, the Title I obligations that we've made, the IDEA obligations that we've made, because many of our school districts are having to make very tough decisions about cutting staff and cutting funding, making negotiations much more difficult when teachers come for a pay raise, and teachers are not paid enough in this country for the work that they do. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here. The second thing I would say is we need to make sure that we preserve teachers and expand teachers' access to unions in this nation. When you have a strong union state, you have teachers who are compensated more fairly in this country. My mother is a teacher in Arkansas. Arkansas is a right-to-work state. My mother has been teaching for 30 years. My mother makes just over $40,000 per year as a teacher. That is just wrong in the United States of America for what we expect from our teachers. And then the last thing I'll say is we need to make sure that our teachers have access to public student loan forgiveness programs. Because if they are willing to serve our students, you know, right now I'm sponsoring a bill that is called What You Can Do for Your Country Act. Look it up and I will stop talking.
The one other thing I would add in addition to everything that Congresswoman talked about is one of the things that we hear about from teachers, especially those in special education, is the burden of mandates and paperwork, really. And I know that sometimes gets turned around on us at the department, and I'll be the first one to admit that there's more that we can do on that front. And we've had commitments with both the advocacy community as well as the Minnesota Association for Special Education Administrators, as well as Education Minnesota. So we're committed to working on that as well too, and reducing that burden for teachers.
One thing I'd like to say as a paraprofessional is in order to retain workers, the money that we get paid a lot of times, without special ed being fully funded, winds up in paraprofessional hours being cut. So a lot of times paraprofessionals will show up a half hour after the school day starts and work until the end of the day, or they'll leave a half hour before the end of school. So just imagine we're working with your kids in math class at the end of the day. Just as we get ready to start working on our own, it's time to go. So just give that some thought, because it's not a very pleasant thought.
Thank you. Don, next question?
Hi, I'm Carl Yeager. I'm 17. 2020 will be my first election, so I'm excited for that. My question is, very kind of you. A large part of public school funding comes from property taxes levied from within the district. This system really disadvantages kids in poorer school districts, especially when the richest communities can carve out special school districts to avoid supporting the poorer schools. So should we abolish the district-based property tax funding system, and if not, what should be done to resolve the discrepancy in school funding between rich schools and poor schools?
That's a great question. Standing O for Carl. Thank you for that question. That's exactly my belief, is that the primary role of the federal government is to help reduce the gap between rich districts and poor districts. We see this kind of inequality across this country for neighborhoods and places that can't quite pay the next operating levy, or frankly don't have the property tax base to support our schools. One of my first jobs out of college was as a newspaper reporter in Memphis, Tennessee. And I literally documented the resegregation of a community after desegregation of our public schools, and watched property owners and taxpayers leave the city of Memphis. And it was devastating to those local communities and communities of color. So I believe the federal government should live up, number one, to its Title I funding commitments. I believe that we should continue to look at that funding structure. One of the items driving, and we often don't take it to the next level, but one of the items driving our operating levies in our districts, and I've got 2 districts, including this one right now, that are about to go out with an operating levy, is because of the promise of 40% subsidy for special education funding, and the average of around 8% subsidy for special education funding. So that is driving a lot of our systemic problems with funding in at least here in the 2nd Congressional District, and I believe across the country. Darren or Mark, do you want to answer Carl's question?
Sure, I would just add, in Minnesota, we do have a structure called equalization revenue that we can definitely work on beefing up, and I think that the governor and commissioner have been interested in that in the past. That kind of would help those districts that do have a lower property tax base, that have a harder time generating that additional revenue. So we do have some mechanisms in place. It's really just a matter of how do we beef those up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carl.
Next question.
My name is Ann Schluter. I'm Lakeville.
I was going to come do it for you.
Yeah, the world isn't made for short people. I am a former acting commissioner of the Department of Education in Minnesota. I have been an education policy advisor to Governor Carlson. And I'm very, very, very interested in our children. One of the things that's going on now that disturbs me greatly is charter schools. I think that Minnesota has a wonderful model. We winter in Arizona, and I'm horrified at how there is no regulation on those schools. The funding is free flowing. And I'm wondering what you think, as a representative, what we need to do to re-instill in our population the value of public education. Without that, we lose our democracy.
I'm just going to hand the audience the microphone for the rest of the town hall. Ann, thank you for being here. Look, your comments, I hope you see by my clapping, I fully support. Look, I'm going to stand up and fight any effort to have this Department of Education either continue to diminish the standards for which these schools are held accountable. And I do not believe Secretary DeVos is an advocate for public schools in this country. In fact, we know that she is not. But that's the whole point. This country was built because of public education. And this country, if you think about some of the challenges we're having, is because we have stopped fully invested in public education in this nation. So I can commit to you that I will fight any effort to divert or to give funding to charter schools in this country, because it only diminishes the public education that this country has been built on.
So I would say that, charter schools were developed in 1992, was when the first state in the nation passed a law, right? And they were developed as a incubator for innovative practices and ideas. And I still think that there's a value in that. So there's a role that charter schools have to play, I think, in Minnesota. What we don't want to see is that charter schools are being set up in communities just to siphon off students who are searching for specific programming because that district can't afford to provide that programming. And a lot of that goes back to, again, the special education lack of funding, because if a district like Lakeville, who has, $11 million in funding gap that they need to close, or Rosemont that has, $24 million, I mean, the programming that they could offer with those would satisfy a lot of the needs that parents feel that they're searching for when they're making those choices to go to charter schools. So again, we think there's a role for that, but again, the purposes just need to be real and innovative and different.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Greg. I live here in Lakeville, and I'm an electrician. And I just wanted to thank you, Angie, for sharing your story about your son. It's a story that I can certainly relate to. I found myself in college for a while, realized it wasn't for me, and was lucky enough to get into a trades apprenticeship. But my question is, how can we ensure that all students that are coming out of high school know all of the options that are available to them, not just four-year options? How can we ensure that they know what's out there?
Thank you so much for the question, Greg. Look, I think we've got to re-envision the way we think about post-secondary education in this country. And that's why I have advocated for post-high school 2 years of community college or of a technical school or an apprenticeship program as a first choice to the first 2 years of college. So if students in high school or even younger were exposed to the different kind of jobs that are available upon graduation, I think that would be a very effective use of our resources. And again, when you're resource constrained, and remember, for decades, this public school system was held accountable under No Child Left Behind, which did a whole lot of damage, I believe, to public education in this country. And right now, obviously, I'm following very closely the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act, its predecessor. But I think we have got to reimagine the choices that we're giving to our students. And I could talk about forever the impact of going to college and figuring out it's not for you. For my son, that was the case, right? He was the kid who took apart the 10-year-old truck in the driveway every afternoon. It was a conversation about, here are your options post-high school. What do you think is going to make you happy and is going to allow you to earn a good life and support a family if you someday have one? And for him, it was a CNC operator certificate. He now has 5 certificates. He tells me he can set up about 20 machines. And I have never, ever seen this kid so happy. He's almost 22 years old, and he's just doing great in his life. And I just have to add that he just got engaged to be married. So there you go. Darren or Mark, anything to add? Awesome. Next question.
I'm Diane Duncan, and I'm from Lakeville. And my son passed away with a heart condition that we didn't know about, and heart screening is something that needs to be done. And so I'm just wondering, I know right now I'm talking to senators, state senators, and state representatives, and they're writing a bill, but I just want people to be aware of it, and each state, the coaches, make sure that their kids, but actually I want to see that their physical yearly or for sports or different activities that they have the heart screening, because we saw this diagram. They check the heart when they're first born, and then they do a stethoscope, which doesn't tell you need an EKG or an echocardiogram. So I don't know, is there anything any of you can do more about getting it into school, just making it more something that needs to be done? I know with the senator and the House, and hopefully it passes, but it might take a few years. So I've been trying to tell the activity director to tell the coaches to have their kids, and right now there's that thing for Patrick that does it voluntarily. But
Thank you, Diane, for being here, and we all feel Joey's loss every time I meet you, and so just thank you for continuing to advocate for him. The answer I would give you is I haven't seen the proposed legislation. It sounds like that would be a state level legislation, but what I can commit today is to go back and look at what are the leading sports organizations and athletic recommendations for screenings, and talk to them directly around what would the opportunity be to do more preventative screenings at sports physicals. We all just share so deeply your loss, and thank you for advocating for Joey.
Just one thing I would add that we're working on there, the federal government about 3 years ago had created a provision that would allow schools to bill students who weren't on an IEP for certain other health-related services. It's called the free care rule. So we've been working closely with the Department of Human Services here in Minnesota to figure out, are there ways that we can expand the ways that schools can bill both Medicaid, medical assistance, as well as private insurance to pay for certain screenings like that. So that's something administratively we're trying to do.
I would just say I want to look at what are the best practices for those screenings around the country, and maybe there's some level of visibility and partnership with the state we can bring to that around Minnesota.
Minnesota is back to school week. I'm sure they've talked to them. It's just like with the concussions and how that more things that needed to be done and stuff. So I just want to see that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for being here, Diane. Thank you.
That's right, the world is not built for short people. My name is Miranda Bach. I am 22 years old. I graduated from Eastview High School in 2015, and one of the biggest reasons I even made it to graduation, didn't end up dead before that, is that my school brought licensed therapists into the school so that you could be seen during school hours when the counselors were not cutting it. And when I know that suicide is still one of the leading causes of death for, ages 14 to 25 right now, is there any way of expanding that program or making it more accessible not only to the whole state, but for people who don't have insurance? Because my family had to have insurance and register to pay for that therapist, because it was still it was just a contract between a therapy office institution bringing in specific therapists into the school for being seen. And I know I probably would have made it out without that program.
Thank you. Darren, can we start with the state level and then we'll work our way up, if that's okay?
So a couple of things. First, going back to just what I talked about in the last one, the ability for districts to bill Medicaid or medical assistance for those types of services is exactly what we're trying to work on with the Department of Human Services. There's another program that we have called School and Mental Health Grants that we've been consistently expanding. The legislature just appropriated a few more $1 million to it this last legislative session. The problem that we're running into there is, especially in rural communities, there's just not the providers to actually do the work. So I think that we need to work with our other partners on the employment and economic development side to figure out how can we really incentivize folks to come to Minnesota to enter the practice of mental health and really expand those services.
Well, I do know it is one of the top majors is psychology right now. Like, all of my friends are majoring in psychology. It's one of the top majors that is like, what do we use this for?
I just add to that, I was going to mention, I do a lot of work actually in rural areas in this district. I've made it a real focus being on the Ag Committee. Rural mental health in general is a completely underserved portion, especially in our schools, but frankly also with our veterans. and right now with our family farmers because of the increasing mental health stress of what's going on out there. So, even in areas like Lakeville, being able to have our school systems have just the appropriate number of counselors for our students is difficult. And again, I hate to be a broken record, but it comes back to we're not fully funding special education in this country, and that is a federal government issue that we need to rectify, because that is going to free up a lot of resources. Coming back to your point about healthcare, when I was your age, I didn't have access to healthcare in our own family for a period of time. And no one understands better, and I hear you. We have to stop playing politics with healthcare in this country. We just have to, right? The ACA made some important advances for this nation. We are going backward at this point in the number of insured in our country. And I have a bill right now. It's a bill that would lower the premium in the individual marketplace by about 10%. It just got scored by the Congressional Budget Office. I can't get a single colleague across the aisle to co-sponsor it, even though this bill was exactly what Republicans in the state Senate put into effect for the state of Minnesota. And the reason is simple. They don't want to do anything that will stabilize the ACA. We got to get the politics out of that. We got to.
Hello, Mark Even, a Lakeville resident for 11 years. We have a soon-to-be fourth grader in the Lakeville school system. So my question actually ties into the last person asked the question around mental wellness and I think mental well-being for students. Is what types of programs or systems are out there that can be supported that is more of the play cook type of model of kind of the well school model where it's about positive reinforcement for students, that they have kind of a safe place to go, that they're all working towards common goals and so forth, and kind of working out the negative reinforcement sometimes of this, and what that would look like.
Well, thank you so much for your question. I haven't seen anything on the federal level that expansive from a model perspective, but what I will tell you is that the federal government should be doing a better job of making sure that all students have a safe and loving environment so that they can best learn. A student can't learn if they're facing bullying. And I will tell you that the amount of bullying documented has gone up fourfold in this country over the last several years. And I know we are seeing that in our public school systems as well. You cannot learn if you're being bullied. And so there are programs out there. Most of them are operating on the private sector side that our school districts across the country and in Minnesota are bringing into our public schools. But the first job of an educator is to make a student, in my mind, feel valued, loved, and open to learning. And the only way that can be accomplished is if we provide that kind of positive environment, and every student around them provides that kind of positive environment.
Yes, we have in Minnesota a fairly strong anti-bullying law that's been in place now for 5 or 6 years. We still have a lot of work to do around that in spreading the word and making sure the districts know what their obligations are under that statute. And we also acknowledge the importance of having a safe and supportive learning environment. So to that extent, we really have been focusing our efforts on programs like PBIS, which is Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports, social emotional learning, restorative practices. As the Congresswoman mentioned, there's a number of organizations like Youth Frontiers that districts partner with that do courage training, so you intervene if you see some bullying going on. So there's a lot of different things that are happening in our school right now, but again, acknowledge that there's still a ways to go.
Thank this morning.
All right, thanks.
Hello, my name is Mary Frances Clardy, and I went through the Lakeville schools from kindergarten through high school. I graduated from here in '77, a long time ago. I'm a teacher for 23 years, and I'm on the state board of school administrators. So my question specifically is dealing with the achievement gap. Okay, Minnesota has one of the largest achievement gaps in the United States. And this is relevant in Lakeville because that population is growing more. Okay, so it is pertinent. Also, we are spending a lot of money in the prison system versus the education system. So with all these factors in mind, what can we do or what is being done to address this?
We'll start at the state level.
Great questions. So this is kind of the first full year that we've been under the new accountability system that Congresswoman Craig mentioned, the Every Student Succeeds Act. So under that, we have schools that are struggling with the students that you're talking about, that are going to receive direct support either from us or from other coaching professionals that actually go into the school and work with teachers and help them learn best practices and evidence-based practices on how to improve student achievement in those schools. So that work is just beginning. The other thing that I would mention is kind of what I mentioned at the outset, is looking at the whole child and acknowledging that we're not going to solve the achievement gap if we're not talking about housing, if we're not talking about healthcare, if we're not talking about nutrition. So the governor and the commissioner are very committed to having kind of all those cross-agency conversations and really bringing forth a legislative agenda and a budget that's going to try and address that whole child.
Versus the money for the prison system. Since just one last piece, that prison system, they're being built based on student scores in 3rd and 4th grade. So.
I would just add to that, obviously, one of the key areas for this Congress is making sure that we fully implement the Every Student Succeeds Act, which has quite a bit on student achievement gaps in it, and those are the requirements. But, there's also a lot of requirements that have been mandated from the federal government with funding that hasn't followed from the federal government. And I think if you look at that Title I money that I talked about, making sure that the role of the federal government is to step in and help close the gap in those school districts that do not have access to the property taxes and the operating levies. I think that is part of the solution, but I think we also just have to acknowledge that that achievement gap exists. It exists all over the country, but we have to keep working to close it, and we just can't stop until we do.
All right, this is going to be the last education-only question. No, you asked a question. We have time for more questions after. I'm just letting everybody else know. This will be the last question of the education only, and then we can open up to any topics after these questions.
My name is Laura Morton, and actually I was going to say I do not have an education question. I'm very in favor of education, and I've benefited from great public schools. And it may be clear from what I'm hearing, my question, or actually I don't even have a question. So my comments are about the need to impeach the president of the United States.
I'm not on Twitter or Facebook. No, I'm not on Twitter or Facebook. I don't read the comments on Twitter or Facebook. So just if there are comments, I haven't seen them.
There actually are not very many, but the few that are there are often me saying what I really feel like we need from you, which is more of an education on your part to your district of why why this president is not fit for office. And I know we've talked a little bit about, I mentioned my feelings after the Mueller report came out, and you have expressed your concerns about the obstruction of justice instances that have been brought up. But there are so many other concerns. One is the number of just unprecedented lying. Another one is the national security concerns, cooperating with Russia's attack on our country in 2016 and covering up for that.
And your question?
Corruption, incompetence, abuse of power. And I mentioned earlier, I don't have a question. It's really,
okay.
I feel like we need Angie's support on this, like over half of your Democratic colleagues have already. And impeachment hearings, impeachment hearings will be televised, which is part of the educational value of them. So we have to do it. Our democracy is at stake.
John, I want to give the panelists a chance to exit stage right.
I was going to give you a chance, the panelists now can be excused. Things besides education.
Thank you to the panelists. And oh my gosh, thank you to the wonderful questions that we got tonight and the experiences and the comments. So, Don, we'll enter into the next phase of the event. I'm keeping myself on time tonight.
You're going to, Congressman Craig will now answer questions on any topics you feel you want to go. But I understand you have a minute, so please get to your question. We can get through as many questions as possible.
Hi. Sorry I missed your last town hall. Okay, I get it. Trump is incompetent and everything that's wrong is his fault. I get it. However, I recently just returned from California and I saw with my own eyes the deplorable state of our homeless people in that state. So my question is twofold. Number one, how is Trump responsible for this homelessness? And number two, how diverting our tax dollars to people who cross our border illegally helps our homeless Americans?
Well, obviously, we need to address homelessness in this country. And I am so proud of Governor Tim Walz, who has made it an absolute edict that we will rid veteran homelessness in the state of Minnesota. And I will do everything I can to support his efforts at the federal level. My philosophy on the president is that when the administration does something that I agree with, for example, the FEED Act, I praise the administration's actions. My policy has been, if the administration is doing something that I don't believe is right for this congressional district, then I say, I don't believe this is right for this district. A good example of that right now is the reckless trade war that the administration has gotten us into over the last several months. And so I'm working with the administration when I can, and I'm standing up to them when I need to and I have to, and that will continue to be the way that I serve this congressional district.
So on the subject of impeaching Trump, I feel like we should focus on the emoluments clause, and so his assets have not been put in a fully blind trust. He just has to ask his son for permission to get his money, and so much taxpayer dollars are going straight into his properties just for the cost of having the security around him. But my question is, have you heard of the Progressive Economic Pledge by TYT? It is the 5 pillars of pledging to fight for a $15 minimum wage tied to inflation and collective bargaining, and to work on behalf of the American worker instead of corporate donors. Medicare for all, a single-payer Medicare for all healthcare system that transforms healthcare in a country into a right, not a privilege. A 10-year plan to mobilize every aspect of American society to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions, to create millions of new high-wage jobs, building the infrastructure and industries of the new economy. College for all, a free new college so that everyone can get a to live the American dream, not just the wealthy elite, and to end the corruption, to ban the private financing of elections, to use all available paths to that amendment so that we can once again have a free and fair elections. Would you be willing to sign said pledge or at least look at it?
I would always be willing to look at anything. So I have not looked at that particular pledge, but I will tell you, I've already voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025, and it passed the U.S. House of Representatives. I fully support every single American having access to health care. I call it universal health care. We can debate how we get there, but they're trying to take away the progress we've made on health care right now. They are down in Texas arguing in a Department of Justice federal court case that the entirety of the ACA should be thrown out. I don't want us to forget that there's an awful lot that we've got to stand and make sure to fight for today before we can have the broader discussion about how we get to universal health care. So that's where I'm focused. I am a sponsor of a bill that would put a fee on carbon in this country and return it to households in the form of a dividend, addressing climate change. And we're seeing this all over the country with the extreme weather that we're experiencing. Our farmers, our family farmers, there may be a time in this country when we can't get corn in the ground. Do you know how devastating that would be to the 2nd Congressional District? So I am all over that issue. College, I talked about that for just a moment a little while ago, the 2-year post-secondary rethinking education. And then the last issue, I think, were free and fair elections. I'm going to tell you, this is one of the biggest issues we have in this country. There are good bills on Mitch McConnell's desk right now. H.R. 1, that would be the most sweeping change in campaign finance reform and protecting our democracy and our elections, and we need the Senate to act. Vote it up or vote it down, but get off your butt and actually do your job. You said no swearing, so I didn't, Don.
Hello, Angie. I'm Steve Groth from Suburban, Minnesota. We met before. By the way, I believe in, I don't believe in the government controlling my health care. I'm going to take care of my own health care. I trust myself, not the government. That's my opinion. Anyway, I came here to Grant's point here. The CDC has said there's 11 children from 2016 to 2019 that were born in Minnesota. I'm talking about, not just Minnesota. And I have a question as to an illegal having a child in our country. It's a citizen. Yet those 11 children who were denied the right to live were denied their citizenship, denied life, because they were born from a botched abortion. And I know this for a fact. There was a lady that worked for their family farm, and she's a nurse, and she said there's one child fought for her life for 2 days. So this is hard for me. My question is, would you support the Born Alive Infant Protection Act if it got before you?
Steve, I appreciate you being here, and you and I do not agree on this issue. I think reproductive rights are a decision between a woman and her physician, and I simply don't believe that government has any role in that decision.
One quick point I just want to make, we're not discussing pro-choice stuff because this child was born from that decision. So we're not taking away that thing, we're not taking away reproductive freedom. We're talking about the child that's born.
Your question was asked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Angie, for being here tonight. I'm grateful for all this that you come out to talk to people. I wanted to ask you about basic rights for children. It's a little bit broader than we talked about earlier. You probably know some of these statistics, but since the year 2000, an estimated 10,000 Palestinian children have been arrested between the ages of 12 and 17. They're prosecuted under Israeli military law, not under civilian law. They're usually taken from their homes at night by armed soldiers. They suffer physical and emotional violence, and they're frequently faced with verbal abuse, intimidation, and often interrogated without family or lawyers. They frequently end up being forced to sign confessions that are false, that are then used to justify their imprisonment in solitary confinement. Annually, between 500 and 700 children are prosecuted this way in Israel each year. This is not a complicated issue. Representative Betty McCollum of our state has put forward a resolution, House Resolution 2407, that's titled Promoting Human Rights for Palestinian Children Living Under Israeli Military Occupation. Would you co-sponsor this bill?
Thank you so much for being here. As a mother, first and foremost, the humane treatment of all children is incredibly important to me, and of course, all children should be treated respectfully. Look, the Middle East, as you well know, and the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority is complex. And I don't agree with everything that the Israeli government does. I certainly don't agree with everything the Israeli government does, just as I disagree respectfully with our own government when I have those disagreements too. It's incredibly important that I continue to use my voice to speak out, though, both for keeping all children safe, and at the same time, any action by this Congress that does not promote a two-state solution with defined borders and two self-determined people in this Middle East conflict is not going to lead to what we all want to. And so I have not signed that bill. It's very complex in the Middle East, as we all have learned. Israel is a very, very unique place in the world. America has very strategic interests there, but certainly I want all children to be treated fairly and humanely, and I appreciate your point.
I hope you will rethink the issue of children. That's not very complicated.
Back to impeachment. What, if anything, are you doing now to get him impeached? What are you doing to push Nancy Pelosi to open impeachment investigation? And if she runs for speaker next time and you're there, will you be voting for her?
I'll give you the same answer I gave before I got myself elected. I'll see who's running, and then I'll decide who I vote for speaker. That would be the case in every session that I would serve in. Look, there is an impeachment investigation underway in the Judiciary Committee as we stand here today. I believe, as a member of Congress from the 2nd Congressional District, and I support the investigation that is underway in the Judiciary Committee. Fully support it. At the same time, when I go around this district and I talk to folks, they talk to me about the price of their health care and prescription drugs, the need to invest in infrastructure. Family farmers talk to me about the fact that they had $26,000 in farm income last year. They talk to me about special education funding. I believe the best way to serve this district is to allow that investigation to continue, look at all of the information that comes out of that investigation, and obviously, if articles are brought to the House floor, then I will have a very difficult decision from the perspective of this is one of the most difficult and serious consequential votes that any member of Congress will ever have to take. So my philosophy has been that I will let judiciary do its work. I will look very carefully at the totality of that information, and I will perform my constitutional duty to this country at that point in time.
Thank you.
I'm going to step in here for a minute. Two of you asked a question earlier. Can we let people who haven't asked a question go first, please?
I'll try to be quick, everybody.
Would you like to have him ask a question?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Absolutely.
I just thought I was loud enough. Thank you, Angela, for coming here today. I wanted to talk about education before, but I missed the line because I wasn't able to listen, so I apologize. But I want to talk about deaf children right now deaf children losing ground. Sorry. It's very important that the IEP process. Sometimes families don't get what they want with IEPs, through IEPs. I know so many stories right now about that with people, and it's just not true that it's all positive, unfortunately. So I want to make a suggestion. I used to live in Washington, D.C. myself for 15 years, and I love Washington, D.C. And I went to Gallaudet University in D.C. I'm sure you're aware of that college there, yeah. The deaf college. Anyway, I wanted to make the suggestion that with Gallaudet University to really sit down and talk with the people there about the children in education and really go there and understand what's happening. The president's name, the president's name is Roberta Cordano. She's the president of the university, and she's actually from Minnesota as well. She's a wonderful person, and just really a good person. And I know the people in your office are very good people as well, and I know sign language it takes a little bit more time to voice, I'm sorry. But I think it's important that you go to Gallaudet University and sit down and have that, and I'm wondering if you will do that and have that discussion about deaf children and what their needs are in IEPs.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your question. Nick Coe is my district director over here on my left, and Nick, if we make sure we get the contact information from this gentleman, then we can reach out and get the appropriate information. I'd also love to talk to the state of Minnesota as well as perhaps Mary and others in the district. So thank you so much for being here and for advocating for deaf children.
My name is John Jocelyn. I'm from Mendota Heights, formerly St. Paul with Betty McCollum's sister, and I fought hard for you when I discovered that I was facing the gentleman who was in your position before. Unfortunately, he ran for another office. Thank God it's not yours. To get to the point here is we brought up the question about children. But this subject has not come up here tonight, unfortunately, and it's a question of what is going on in our country under our current president in handling immigration. It is an immoral system, and there is money to be made by private prisons in many, many ways. So my question really will be to ask you to comment on what is going on in our immigration system. I was fortunately sitting next to Congressman Bierman, who also, this is both on a national and local level. We had a driver's license for immigrants that did not pass. It passed in the House, but it did not pass in the Senate because they refused to look at it. Currently, right now, we're looking at the Trump administration in rewriting the bills for the over-the-floor amendment that protects children. Today, he wants to put them indefinitely in detention. So can you respond? It's such a large, that's my question. Please respond to what is going on in immigration.
Well, I wish I had been able to make it down to one of the detention centers over this district work period. I was actually scheduled to be in El Paso to visit personally a detention center last weekend, and Veronica Escobar, Congresswoman from El Paso, had her hands full with the recent mass shootings in her community, so she was unable to have the members of Congress who are visiting there. Look, I 100% oppose this administration's detention of children and family separation policies. They are, this is not America. This is not who we have to be. We, in 2013, were this close in the Senate to a comprehensive immigration reform bill. This is not who we are as a country today. We had money in that bill to have more customs and border folks. We had money in that bill for additional borders where local communities thought they should be placed. We had additional money in that bill for drones, for other ways of keeping our borders secure. But seeking asylum to this country is a legal way to be here. Seeking asylum is legal. And we have to have immigration policies that are able to and equipped to and adequately adjudicate these cases. It is not a solution to stop all aid to Central American countries. I'm a mother. These people are coming here from Central America because the life they face, where they live, is unbearable. And I think we should have borders on this country, but I don't think we should have inhumane policies in this country.
One more question. If you've still got a question, staff has note cards. You can write that down with your contact info, and they'll get you answers. So, final question.
Well, thank you. Good slinging.
Jeopardy.
So I really don't have a question. I have a comment, and I want to thank you. I am a letter carrier with the United States Postal Service, and we have a bill in Congress right now. It's one of the shortest bills ever, HR 2382, and you co-sponsored that bill. Thank you very much. And there's a lot of bipartisan support on that also. If we can get 290 co-sponsors, it'll be heard on the floor this year. So that's what our goal is. We want to keep the post office alive. This is to stop the mandatory pre-funding of future retiree health benefits out 75 years up to the future. So thank you very much for helping co-sponsor this bill, and I hope that we can get it passed.
Thank you, Connie.
Before Representative Craig gives her final closing remarks, I just want to say thank you to everybody for the very congenial, respectful manner in which this town hall was conducted. We've all seen examples of how they don't need to be conducted. So I wanted to thank you for coming today, spending your time, and everyone's attendance and behavior. So I'm going to turn it over to Representative Craig to give her closing remarks.
Thank you so much. And Don, thank you for navigating another town hall for me, Don Center, and for your 38 years? 36 years as a teacher. There is no more honorable profession in this country. Well, thank you all for such a substantive debate and discussion on education funding in this country. We need to invest in America again, and that starts with investing in Americans. I am a strong supporter of public education. I believe we should rethink our secondary education system, and I believe we should move to make sure that all students understand 100% what their options are. There are other big issues in this country, and there are a lot of emotions in this country right now. But I can tell you this, I am still going to get up every day and look for that common ground. There will be places where we won't find it. I know that. But where we can, I believe members of Congress have a responsibility. And I want to bring up in my closing remarks just one other issue. You didn't ask about it tonight, but I believe, and most of you know my record here, as a person who belongs to the West End Trap Club, the mother of sons who hunt, I believe that we in America can balance our appreciation and our love for the Second Amendment with common sense gun safety reform. I do not believe it is an either-or discussion. And so for those of you who believe strongly in the Second Amendment, I want to extend an invitation and dialogue with you, because I believe that we can find some common grounds. Our common ground today, I hope, is the bill, the universal background check bill that is sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk as I stand here right now. Common ground, closing the Charleston loophole. These are common ground issues. And I'm going to end with this. I just sent 2 kids back to college in the last 2 weeks. My 20-year-old Jacob, he looked at me as he left. And he said, "Mom, you're a member of Congress. What are you going to do? I don't feel safe." Our children come back to school, and they are going to be going through active shooter drills. We do not have to be like this in America. And I understand that passion runs deep. I'm a gun owner myself. But I believe that if we listen to each other and we work together, we won't save every life, but we will save lives in this country. So thank you so much for being here today.